Hello, friends and neighbors. You're listening to Honor the Classics, a new series here on the Movie Squad YouTube channel where we pay tribute to some of the greatest movies ever made that you heard of and might not have heard of. I'm your host, Joey DeAngelis, joined by my co-host, Allison Cola. How are we this evening?
It's a jungle in here. I'm telling you what, I'm excited to talk about this movie because this is one that when we met, I had never seen, but I'd always wanted to see. And now I have seen it, and I love it.
And you've seen it twice now since that time. So a little background on Kong that I think is important for this discussion. I might be the biggest Kong fan in the state of New Jersey. I'll just put that out there. I own the movie on so many home video formats: Laserdisc, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, digital. It was one of the first movies I ever picked up on digital, and it's really just my favorite movie of all time. But with this movie, I think it's important to talk about it. I think especially now because we're getting the new Kong movie. It's going to be the second film in what Warner Brothers and Legendary is calling the Monsterverse, which will be, a series of movies with giant movie monsters. Godzilla 2 is supposedly going to have King Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan, of course Godzilla, and then eventually Kong and Godzilla are going to face off for the second time on the big screen. A little history on this movie itself. It was released in 1933 during the height of the Great Depression, made by two adventure filmmakers, Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. Marion C. Cooper, this guy, he was just all about adventure and exploration. He was a fighter pilot, and he landed a plane, became a POW around the time of World War I, I believe. And it's just every episode of his life was just some kind of adventure. Then he met Ernest B. Schoedsack. They were like really like contrast. Like Marion was very short, Schoedsack was very tall. And Schoedsack was like the cameraman of the duo, and they made like adventure documentaries, or like pseudo adventure documentaries. So one of their most famous films, Chang, which was one of the first Oscar nominated movies, has a really amazing shot of a tiger climbing a tree, and this is before CGI and technology and all that, and they have the tiger crawl up to the camera and like roar into it and like kind of paw at it, and they had to kill the tiger afterwards because they did not want to be eaten by a tiger. But it was just it's just very different filmmaking from today. You can create all these digital things, but back then the world was a much more mysterious place. I think that's really what adds to Kong. And then Cooper became very interested in gorillas. He read a book at a very young age, which the title of it escapes me. Gorillas, something in Equatorial Africa. He wanted to make a giant gorilla film. And originally,
I think he achieved that quite nicely.
He did, but it was supposed to be a very different movie, Allison. Before they came across, stop motion animation, Cooper wanted to do a gorilla versus, or I'd heard about this a while ago, a gorilla versus Komodo dragon movie, where they were going to get real animals to do that. Today, that obviously would not fly, and it would be very difficult to have a gorilla fight a Komodo dragon, and I would not want to do that. And then he became one of the head honchos at a movie studio that's no longer relevant, RKO, which would eventually go on to produce Citizen Kane. Marion C. Cooper came across a project called Creation. It was going to be the most expensive thing RKO had ever made. And the special effects were done by Willis O'Brien, the grandfather of stop-motion effects, even before Ray Harryhausen. Willis O'Brien, he did The Lost World, and that was in 1925, based on the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book. The special effects at that time were so groundbreaking that Arthur Conan Doyle showed the footage to scientists and magicians at the time and told them this was real dinosaur footage. Eventually he told them it wasn't, but back then, they had never seen anything like it. And I tell you, Willis O'Brien, I mean, even the movie itself isn't that exciting, The Lost World, but the special effects definitely are the highlight of that picture. And it ends like King Kong, where you have a monster rampaging the city. But back to Creation. Creation was going to be directed by Harry Hoyt, who made The Lost World. And then Harry Hoyt wanted to make this movie Creation. It was a giant, like, dinosaur epic. Actually, on the Kong Blu-ray, they have somebody read the script of Creation, a story treatment of Creation, and they actually have some excerpts of test footage from the movie. But the film was never made because it would have cost at least $1 million, and RKO could never justify that on tickets that were like 5-10 cents a piece. So then Marion C. Cooper saw an opportunity with the stop-motion effects. He could have his giant gorilla picture and save money by using the monsters and the dinosaurs that were created for Creation. And that's how one of the ways Kong was made. Another way they were able to save costs, before we get into the other specifics of the film, was that they shot another film simultaneously called The Most Dangerous Game, based on a short story, where they used the same sets, some of the same actors, even some of the same music as Kong. Very different, not a very different kind of movie, 30s adventure movie, a lot of fun, no dinosaurs, sadly. So they got the movie, and the rest of it's kind of film history. I mean, we talk about Kong special effects are really one of the main reason why people talk about this movie. And you think about it, you have to think about Kong. It was released in 1933. It was released at a time where sound film was rather limited. There were sound experiments before, but after the Jazz Singer in 1927, they started to make some sound films, and they were a little boring. I think when you watch them today, they're a little boring because there's a lack of music. Just the sound quality is a bit different. Kong's sound design is impressive. Max Steiner wrote a hell of a score. Max Steiner really was the man back in the day. I mean, in addition to writing Kong's score, I just need to name 2 more films and people would be impressed. Gone with the Wind and Casablanca, none of which he won Oscars for. He didn't win Oscars for any of those films. He won for, I think he won for Now Voyager with Bette Davis, which is not a bad score, but I mean, when you think of Gone with the Wind, especially the opening theme with the title crawl that looks like Rocky.
I know. I hear the overture for Gone with the Wind, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm watching the movie, and I'll just sit down wherever I am, and I realize I'm not actually watching the movie. And then I have to realize I'm a normal person and get up. But it's really incredible watching the list of talent go by. I mean, even Kong gets his own credit. The Kong puppet gets his own credit in the movie.
Yeah. In the opening credits of the movie, they have the players, or the cast, and then they have "and Kong" in parentheses, the 8th wonder of the world. Before we move on to the special effects, I want to also give a shout out to Murray Spivak, who did the incredible sound design for Kong. Kong was like a combination of tiger and lion roars, and he, again, it's like thinking about Star Wars with Ben Burton, all the weird things he had to do with the special effects. And he even, in one of the supplements, he even talks about how he did Kong's like grunt, which kind of sounded like, and it was actually his voice doing that. But the way he was able to do it was really impressive and really works for the character. And one of my other favorite moments that really marries score to sound is towards the end with the Empire State Building sequence, that iconic sequence where the music builds up and up and up and up and up as he's climbing up the building. And then after a little while, you hear the music kind of start to fade, and then the sound effects come back on again. And you hear the airplane motors go, and they have machine guns going. And then after Kong, gets injured, because spoiler alert, he does die in the movie. Spoiler alert for an 80-year-old movie.
I don't think it's possible to put a spoiler alert on an 80-year-old movie. Is there? I mean, really? By this point, you should have seen it.
Especially one with so iconic finale. And at the very end, when Kong's weakened and he's going to die, the sound effects start to fade again, and it fades into the beautiful score once again. So really, just Max Steiner and Murray Spivak had a really nice marriage of sound design, sound effects, and the musical score. But getting back to Willis O'Brien, the man, the myth, the legend behind the special effects, this was, again, they had a lot of help because they had a lot of the monsters from Creation, like the T-Rex, the Brontosaurus, the Stegosaurus, the Pterodon. They were all supposed to be monsters in the movie Creation. And they actually made they made more creatures, like the Styracosaurus, and that was originally in Kong, but that was part of a deleted scene, which I'll get to later. But the special effects on Kong are obviously done by stop motion animation. Allison, what has been your I guess somebody who only watched Kong for the first time recently, some of your stop motion experiences before this movie.
Really, my first stop motion experience was probably a lot of people's. It was The Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton. I watched it once when I was really young, and it scared me very badly. But when I came back to it, I realized how beautiful of a film it actually was, and how painstaking it must have been to just completely have to manipulate each and every minute facial detail. Getting into some of the other family-friendly stop-motion animation, like the Aardman stuff, Wallace and Gromit's a good classic, and then now recently with Leica Studios and their booming business of stop-motion animation. It's kind of interesting to see where it all really comes from. Probably my favorite sequences do have to do with Kong and his interaction with the other creatures, and then his interaction with Fay Ray, because a couple of times they have stop-motion human puppets in here, and every once in a while it's so seamless, almost the transitions that, well, seamless, you can see it, but you acknowledge and admire how well it's really done. And even just watching it for the first time when we watched it together, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And it was just so fascinating to watch literally cinema history unfold as I was watching all these sequences. Right. And seeing all the tricks and kind of knowing how they did it. But it's all the fun. It's like if you go to a magic act and you know how the trick is done, you still appreciate the trick.
You appreciate the craft, really the craft behind it. Thank you for bringing up the Fay Ray interactions, because that's a lot more difficult than probably some people would realize. Now, one sequence I can think of in particular that is really effective is, it sounds weird if you've never seen the movie before, and that's when Kong is peeling off her clothes. And you go, how does a stop-motion puppet peel off Fay Ray's clothes? You're about to say something.
This is a mature review, adult audiences only.
Yeah, funny enough, they took that scene out in one of the re-releases because they deemed audiences shouldn't be seeing that kind of thing. Whatever, it's in there, it's in the movie, you can get it on Blu-ray.
They don't even really peel off all that much. If anything, she's left in her nightdress. So if you're wondering how graphic this gets, it's not graphic at all, especially not by today's standards. She's in a nightdress when he finishes.
Oh, yeah. So when he's peeling off the clothes, there's the Kong stop-motion puppet, and then actually there's this technique called rear screen projection, which basically they have a projector. It's exactly how it sounds. They have a projector and behind a screen, and they would frame by frame show like old film that they had shot. So they would synchronize the stop-motion Kong with the movements of the robot Kong arm, because they did make a giant life-size Kong arm to hold Fay Ray in the close-up shots, as well as a giant life-size Kong bust.
And the foot.
And the foot.
Yes. The foot.
Can't forget the foot. Oh man, those poor souls who got stomped on by the foot. And you see, the way he peels off the clothes, and it's perfectly very much perfectly synchronized. It's weird to talk about that. Like some of the most impressive moments in the film. I mean, again, the battle scenes the fight scenes that Kong does and destruction is incredible. But like when you watch the movie over and over again, you really get to appreciate the slower moments, the moments with like the small details and the ones that probably had to take a lot of technical preparation. So the other shot that I can think of is we talked about this when we watched this the other day. Is the scene where Kong enters his lair. There are so many special effects elements going on in that particular shot. Now, this isn't like today where you can just do it on a screen. I'm not saying that's easy, but it's probably a lot easier than what it was back then, where you had film was highly flammable and could be easily damaged, and you had to put all the film elements in an optical printer, which would take some of those elements, like the water, the bubbling, what looked like lava or whatever, and the smoke, and you'd have to put it all together. And if it didn't work, you'd have to reshoot the footage. Most everything, unless you're somebody like Christopher Nolan, everything is shot on digital now, so you come across different problems. We don't come across problems where it's like, oh no, the entire film, this is damaged, we have to redo the stop-motion stuff, which could take weeks, some of the stuff. For example, the T-Rex fight itself took 7 weeks to shoot. It's hard to talk about this movie for me in some ways, because I have so many favorite moments and scenes. I almost want to do a commentary track of this at some point on Movie Squad. it's just one of my favorite little moments in the film it's something that was pointed out to me in the documentary where Kong puts Anne on a rock in his cave. And there's an elasmosaur, plesiosaur slithering up out to eat Anne. And in the shot after that, Kong goes after the plesiosaurus, that snake creature. But before he does that, he looks like he's picking up a flower with his like a pinky sticking out. It's a very small detail of characterization, and if you only watched the movie once, you'll never notice it. I didn't notice. I mean, the first time I watched this, I was 8 years old. I was just more excited by the fact that Kong was going to beat something up, you know. But it's really just like a beautiful little moment. And Kong, and that's all Willis O'Brien and his team, like all the details they put into Kong. Like when Kong is locked up, chained up on stage, and he's looking at Anne. And it's just such lovely detail. He's looking down at Anne, and then he sees Jack, and it's a slightly different variation. And he's looking down at Jack, you know. It's just, it's weird to talk about just like these weird smaller moments. You think, oh, the T-Rex battle was awesome, and of course all those moments are awesome. But then you look at the more intimate moments. Allison, what are some of your favorite little special effects bits in the movie?
It's gotta be Kong's face. Like, Kong himself is so interesting to watch. I love watching, you said that his original puppet was covered in rabbit's fur. Yeah. It was so interesting to watch that fur change and move with each frame because you could see where people were handling him.
Oh, yeah.
And his face is definitely the most interesting thing because it doesn't look like a traditional gorilla's face. It has a lot more expression. The eyes are absolutely gigantic, and they've made sure to make those eyes very bright so you can get a lot of emotion out of them. Like you were saying with the scene where Kong is chained up in the theater, and he's in between despair, anger, he wants to be with Anne again. You can see just a whole range of emotions. I had seen Peter Jackson's 2005 Kong before this one. I had never seen the original OG Kong until you showed it to me. Granted, the CG gorilla looked cool, but it didn't have quite the emotional range that this one did. Some would argue that this was a little bit more cartoony, but what do you expect? It's a giant gorilla running around New York. Realism has been thrown out the door.
Yeah, and the other thing I like to say is that Kong always looked more like a gorilla from your nightmares. You know, it's just something that was, like somebody said, like an uber gorilla, something more than just your average gorilla. And that's something I like about the Kong Skull Island design, is that it doesn't, like, the Peter Jackson one looks great, but it looks like a gorilla. This new one, on the other hand, the new one really made me think of the original Kong. It looks furious. It really looks angry. It's very expressive in all of the promotional footage I've seen so far.
Yeah.
Other special effects moments I have to talk about is the elevated train sequence, which was not in the original script, I believe, but they kind of added that last minute. And it's one of the most frightening scenes in the movie because people die in that scene, and the claustrophobia of people falling on top of each other is fairly well photographed for the 30s, and Kong just bashing on the train. It's just such a well done, well put together little sequence. I guess with the special effects, I guess we can talk a little bit about the actors in the movie. And before...
Oh yeah, there's humans in this movie. I almost forgot.
Yeah, you'd think it's just music and giant monkeys and airplanes and all that, but there are people. There are people in this movie. You know, so what would you say about the people, Allison?
There's a lot of them. I mean, I like to think about, like, Roland Emmerich's cast of thousands. I think then I see this movie, there's a lot of players in here. Not just background people, but there's a lot of good main cast characters, the sailors, the island natives, and then, of course, we have it all up to Ann Darrow, Carl Denham,
Jack
and, oh goodness, yes, Jack Driscoll. I always forget his name because he's like the Gaston of this movie in a way. You know, Beauty and the Beast references abound in this movie, by the way, so excuse my use of that reference. The three main human characters are definitely the most interesting. My favorite has to be Carl Denham because he's just so confident and eccentric. He's absolutely out of his mind, wanting to go film a movie on a place called Skull Island where there are deadly natives who make regular human sacrifices to a gorilla monster.
Yeah.
You're out of your mind.
No.
But it's so glorious.
But the thing is, what's amazing about that is that the three main characters are actually based off of, it's semi-autobiographical, based on Marion C. Cooper, Ernest B. Schoedsack, and Ruth Rose. Now, Ruth Rose actually wrote the final draft of this screenplay because it was handled by Edgar Wallace and James Ashmore Creelman. But Ruth Rose really, it kind of put her stamp on the story. And she actually would go on to write the sequel, released literally 6 months after the movie's release, Son of Kong. Not the greatest movie, but it's fine. Carl Denham himself was based off of Marion C. Cooper. He was the shorter guy. He was the guy who was like, yeah, let's make this movie. You know, we're gonna shoot everything. And then Schoedsack, who was eventually married to Ruth Rose, is very much like Jack Driscoll. He's the tall one. He's the good-looking one. And he's with the female lead. And one of my favorite little bits in the movie is where Carl Denham's like doing a test shot, shooting test footage of Fay Wray. And she's just like, do you always shoot it yourself? And he talks about how there was like a charging rhino, and his cameraman didn't trust him to shoot the rhino before it got him. And he's like, that's why I shoot these things myself. Carl Denham was always like one of my favorite movie characters as a kid. And I always sort of equated him to John Hammond, except John Hammond I would say John Hammond's intentions were a bit more, I would say, genuine. And you could, almost sympathize. Whereas Carl Denham was very much a showman, and it was like, yeah, I'll make all the money in the world, woo-hoo! But he's still Robert Armstrong plays my 30s impression.
Yeah, you can definitely kind of see the dynamics there, and it's very believable when you read more about these directors.
Oh, and the other moment with Jack Driscoll that always cracks me up is when is his sudden, because he was bashing women in the beginning of the movie, and then he talks to Anne, and you obviously know he's going to fall in love with her.
I know what you're talking about.
But sometimes love is really subtle, and sometimes you get lines like, say, I guess I love you.
And people say Disney movies aren't subtle.
Oh my goodness! I remember I did an audio review of this movie for my radio station, and I used that clip, and people couldn't believe that was in the movie. Oh man! But
So remember, when you're complaining that Disney princesses only know their princess for a day, remember Kong. It was just one line of dialogue.
Say, I guess I love you.
I burst out laughing the first time that I watched that because you told me it was up and coming, but you didn't tell me what was coming. And I was just anticipating like this big romantic moment, and then he just comes out with that, and I was like, really? I would better pick up lines on The Bachelor.
But in addition to the characters and sound design and the effects and all that, it's a very well-paced movie. The movie runs about 100 minutes. It spends about the first 40 minutes getting us to the island, building up. We don't see Kong until about 45 minutes into the movie. And then right after we see Kong, it just goes. It bolts to the finish line. Like, it goes like big scene after big scene. And it makes sense for these scenes to be in the movie. It's kind of like an exhilarating thrill ride. Because once he gets Anne, he roars, and it's an exciting sequence, all this hype. He goes out, the sailors go after Kong, and then they go up to the Stegosaurus, and they get attacked by the Brontosaurus, and they get shaken to the log by Kong, and then, oh man, all these things. It's just one thing after another. It's like if I don't know, it's just kind of crazy to think about how many things. And the movie, this goes perfectly into what I was going to talk about, was going to have another scene, which is kind of a little homage of it in the Peter Jackson version, is the spider pit sequence.
My absolute favorite thing ever.
It's in between the escape for the Brontosaurus and the log chasm sequence, or at least where it first starts out, where you're wondering what are they running from? What's preventing them from like not just getting off the log and just going across, running away from Kong? Because you think about that, and Kong's like shaking the log and all. It's one of my favorite scenes. I love Kong's design in it. It looks great. But then you go, wait a minute, what's on the other side of the log? What's out there? The Brontosaurus stopped chasing them, and originally there was a Styracosaurus, which is kind of like a Triceratops, and that chased them on the log. And there's actually like a beautiful photo, I have to send it to you, Allison, where it's Kong and he's lifting up the log, and on the other side you see the Styracosaurus, and you understand, oh crap, there's no escape for them. So then, after Kong shakes the people off the log, you think they're dead, but they're not, because they get up from the cavern, they're hurt and all that, and then creatures, there's a giant crab monster, a tentacle octopus thing, a pig-nosed lizard, a spider, and they all start attacking and eating the sailors, and it's brutal and it's disgusting. This sequence is lost. It was cut out because it was too gruesome, and it slowed down the pace of the film, which I could totally understand why. But actually, the amazing thing is, it's on the Blu-ray too. Peter Jackson and his team recreated the sequence using the same techniques as what they would have used in 1933. So they didn't use CGI or anything. They used matte paintings. They created sets. They made it black and white. They made stop motion figures, and they actually they put the scene in like a series of clips where you would see where the scene would be positioned. So a lot of dedication from Peter Jackson and his crew. I believe Peter Jackson's favorite movie, and that's why he made the 2005 Kong. Going off of that, Kong was released in 1933 and became a huge hit, obviously. It made a lot of money for the time. It opened at two theaters, the RKO Roxy Theater and the Radio City Music Hall. And they were across from each other, and it made a lot of money. And then this film did not really have too many imitators for a very long time, actually. That's the funny thing about Kong, is that, Kong was a big success, a really iconic movie, but for years, people didn't make it because the stop-motion technology is so expensive, so time-consuming. It's used in only little bit things. I mean, there was Mighty Joe Young in like the late 40s. In the 50s, it got a re-release, which was more successful than the releases in the 30s. And this was when people could finally say, you know what? Let's make some monster movies. Like the people who grew up with Kong, like the Ray Harryhausens and all that, they started making movies. Ray Harryhausen made his own giant monster movie, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And it's a fun little movie. It's, he says Godzilla ripped it off, but I think Godzilla's a little better. But, it was very much inspired by Kong. And you see like throughout like the 50s, from the 50s to almost you could say like the 90s, stop motion became one of the main ways you could create large monsters, pretty much. Like even in the first Terminator, some of the shots of the Terminator, or like the Terminator robots, are all some of them are stop motion effects, actually. So that just shows you how far the stop motion legacy goes. And again, there's different dinosaur movies that have been made throughout the years. Most importantly, Jurassic Park, which was originally supposed to be an all stop motion movie until they again became a groundbreaking movie and used digital effects and a combination of robotic technology, and it still looks great to this day. Kong and Jurassic Park are really just two watershed, like groundbreaking movies in terms of the technology that they used and how they employed it in their movies. And that's I guess my argument for Kong is one of the greatest movies ever. Some people might just look at it as a giant monster movie. Some people might look at it, like a lot of people go to New York City and you go to any gift shop and you'll see a gorilla on an Empire State Building globe or some little figurine or something. So it almost became more of an icon than just a movie. But as a movie, it's not the most deep movie. As Marion C. Cooper said himself, it's just supposed to be the greatest damned adventure movie ever made, and it's certainly up there, and it has few equals in that department. I'll let you talk a little bit because I've been.
No. Look, true story. When I was first watching the Kong movie with Joey, he gets really excited about movies, and that's one of the fun reasons that I make him watch movies with me, and he makes me watch movies with him. Mostly because he's one of the only other nerds who will watch classic movies with me, which I really appreciate. So listening to him and listening to you even now talk about all this trivia, it's just fascinating. And I did a fun fact check. I went to check the IMDb page. Kong gets his own credit as the 8th wonder of the world on the IMDb page.
Oh, does he?
He's literally that iconic, is that even now he's getting his own credit. Kong, it's an important movie for a lot of reasons, not just because of the special effects, just because it is a great adventure movie. When I was watching it for the first time, I just kept thinking to myself, this is awesome. I don't know what my sentiments would have been like had I been a woman in the 30s watching this. I probably would have thought it was still good. I probably would have screamed. But it's such a great movie, and it's a great way to start off our new series of classic movie reviews.
Yeah, I definitely say so. You know, Kong, I'll say, is a very well-known character, maybe not as widely seen movie anymore, or at least the original one. And I hope after the release of Kong Skull Island, and maybe after my blabbering and Allison's great points, you know, we'll convince you to at least check this one out. Or if you have seen it before, check it out again, because it's definitely worth it. And now this review, after we sign off with Skype, I'm probably going to pop it in my Blu-ray player again for the umpteenth time.
Hey, if you haven't seen Kong and we missed anything that you may have thought of, why do you think that this is a great movie? Why do you guys think that this is a classic? Or if you're a negative Nancy, why do you think it's not? We respect your opinion, even if it's wrong. Just like, comment, subscribe. Just comment below what you think. Comment on our Facebook page, Movie Squad. Find us there. We want to hear your thoughts, and we want suggestions for classic movies that you guys want us to review. We know we at least have one more up and coming, right, Joey?
We do have one more. It's another black and white film, but this time it's a foreign language film. It's in French, and it's about a tale as old as time, one might say.
You know, because there's no reason why we would have to review a movie like that coming up in March.
It's funny, too, because Kong and this one are very similar, you know, archetypal stories of the very same, like, you know, fairy tale. But thank you so much, guys, for listening to this video. Also like to thank Allison for joining me in this discussion on my favorite movie of all time. And we hope you check us out on Movie Squad and check out future videos for Honor the Classics. See you guys later.
Bye-bye!